Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're all about the positivity, always about the positivity here on the show. And with me right now, I've got a very special guest. When you talk about women in professional wrestling, this woman right here is just one of so many people that have not only been incredible in the ring, but as a manager, as a valet, as a personality, she excelled and really set the bar for many after her. I'm pleased to welcome the one and only Queen of Extreme, Francine. Francine, welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to chatting with you today.
Yes, likewise. So where are you from? Tell me about your childhood.
So I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My father was a bus driver for SEPTA, which is the buses, trolleys. He worked there for, I don't even know how many years, millions of years. My mom was in retail and she quit to have me because I was an accident and had three older siblings. My oldest sister was 22 years ahead of me. So 22 years, then 20 years, then my brother's 12 years older. So I was not planned. My mom was like 42 and she used to say I was the best mistake she ever made. So, kind of middle class upbringing, never watched wrestling as a child, wasn't into it. Brought up Roman Catholic. Just church was a big part of our lives growing up, and Catholic schoolgirl, went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade. So
Okay.
yeah, that's
What
pretty
was
much it.
what was that experience like?
I didn't know any different. You start because back then we didn't have preschool and all that kind of stuff. So just started when I was 5 in kindergarten and was just very disciplined. I don't even think nuns are around these days anymore, but the nuns were mean. I saw some boys in my class get smacked in the face and whacked with rulers, and as a parent, I would have been down there so fast. But that's what they did back then. So I always tried to be a good girl and not get in trouble because I didn't want to get smacked by a nun.
Yeah, times have changed.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they do it in this day and age, but I know there's not many nuns left in the Catholic school system. So, but they were mean. God, they were.
Yeah.
If you thought I was mean when I worked, they were super mean.
Yeah.
So,
Well, before you discovered professional wrestling, what did you want to do growing up?
so the first thing that was on my agenda growing up was to be a mother. That's all I ever wanted to do. Played with dolls forever, pretended I was a mommy. And then I realized, well, I might not meet the man of my dreams right away. So I probably need to get a job. So I initially wanted to be a nursery school teacher because I loved children. I loved working with kids. And when I was in grade school and high school, I was a safety. I don't know if they even have those anymore either, but helped the little kids cross the street, would take them to their classrooms after recess,
Mhm.
stuff like that. I became a nanny. I was a nanny for a short while for 4 boys. And I took care of them. I babysat countless number of children. A lot of the teachers would call on me to babysit their kids. So I just had this genuine love for children. And
Yeah.
I wanted to be a nursery school teacher. But when I graduated high school, I was not even sure if I wanted to go to college or not. So I immediately got a job. I was working at first for a telemarketing company taking orders for catalogs. And then I left there um, and went to a place called Provident Mutual Life Insurance, and I became a data entry processor. And that was in Center City, Philadelphia. That's when I stumbled upon ECW. I didn't like what I was doing there. I was sitting in a cubicle, uh, didn't have a window, didn't have anything to, look out to or talk to. And it was quite boring and not my cup of tea. And so I saw the commercial for ECW, and it was like, do you want to be a manager, a referee, a wrestler? Call this number. And I called and set up a meeting with Todd Gordon. Rest is history. So,
The cool thing about that particular time in the wrestling world was that everything was sort of starting to become cutting edge. ECW was like the um, guinea pig, I guess you could call it, for the Attitude Era. And then, of course, the Monday Night Wars. It became this innovative company. And around this period of time, too, you started seeing a lot of realism kind of take place in the world of wrestling because it was very comic booky, cartoon-ish, and ECW was more grounded, smash mouth, really set the bar for, your TLC matches, your cage matches, and all the stuff that would come later. And when you picked up the phone and called Todd, um, do you remember that conversation that you had saying, "Hey, I want to get into this. How do I get involved with professional wrestling?"
yeah. So after I saw the commercial, I had watched their program maybe for a month or two, not even. And I was watching what the women were doing. And, my knowledge of wrestling was this much. I mean, I didn't know anybody in the business. I didn't know much about it. I just had started watching WWF at the time. I was like 19 years old and was watching WWF and Global. And so my knowledge of the sport was very small. And I see this company and they're based out of Philadelphia. And I'm like, well, I live in Philadelphia. And then I'm watching the show and I see the women and I'm like, well, I think I can do this. Not even knowing, what a bump was or the travel that was involved. I didn't know anybody there, but I figured let me try and give it a call and see what I can do because my job was pretty much like making me crazy and I wasn't happy. And so when I called the number, a woman had answered, and here it was Bob Ortiz's wife, Lex. Bob Ortiz was our ring announcer, and it was his wife, Lex, who is still dear friends to this day. They came to my wedding. Like they're such a good couple. But she was like, well, you have to meet Todd Gordon. And I wasn't even sure who Todd was at this time because, again, I had just started watching their program. So I was like, okay, give me an address. And they give me the address and I go down there with my dad and my dad waits in the car because I didn't want to look like a baby and bring him inside. And here I'm like 20 at the time now. And it was a pawn shop and it was like all bars on the windows and the doors and had to be buzzed in and all this kind of stuff. But I meet Todd and he just looks at me and he says, "You're a really pretty girl. You won't even have to bump." And I remember saying to myself, what is a bump? Like, I don't know what a bump is, but I didn't want to seem like I was stupid. So I didn't ask him what it was. I was just like, okay, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, you're going to go to wrestling school. So I'm thinking I'm going to be a female wrestler. So I'm like, oh, okay. And I start training and I train with JT Smith and I was the only girl in the class. And I remember being told you have to go to this one show. You're going to meet Paul Heyman. So I'm like, okay, that's great. And I didn't know much about Paul at that time either because I wasn't really into WCW yet. But I meet Paul and I go to the show in Montgomeryville and he's just like, you are going to be Miss Montgomeryville. You're going to win a fake beauty pageant and you're going to be our guest timekeeper. You're going to sit there and you're going to ring the bell after every match. And I said, okay. And he said, but when 911 comes out, you're going to take a choke slam. And I was like, I don't know what that is. We didn't do that in wrestling school yet. And he was just like, what, you don't want to take it? And I was like, no, I'll do it. I just don't know what it is. And he's just like, they'll give you a cue. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but here Al 911, all he did was grab me by the hair, drag me in the ring, and pick me up and slam me. And it was just like that white noise where you heard absolutely a gasp and then you heard nothing. And they put me on a stretcher and they took me out the back and I went home. And I was like, oh, I don't even know if I did good or not. Like, did I do well? Are people happy? I didn't get to go back to the locker room. And here I got a phone call, come back. I was like, okay. And I just kept going back, going back. And then finally, the opportunity with the pit bulls came up. And then, it was a handshake deal at first and then a contract.
They really put you through the ringer, your first major bump, and it was almost like welcome to wrestling,
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Now, when you're training, I mean, being the only girl in the class, I mean, you're taking those bumps. I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's intense. The work that these men and women do now, of course, obviously, the stuff that they go through, they put themselves through. I'd imagine it was just so much work, so much stress on you to try to get the reps down and put it in and make sure that you were able to follow along.
Well, at first, like I said earlier, I thought I was going to be a female wrestler. So I was trying to train as a female wrestler. The night when I met Paul, he told me point blank, wrestling with women these days does not sell. It's not going to get you over. What's going to get you over is being a manager.
Right.
And I was just like, really? And he's like, trust me. And I said, okay, I have no reason not to trust you. You know what you're talking about. And
Right.
he was 100% right. Because at that time, female wrestling wasn't that big of a thing, and it seemed like when ECW would have a women's match, people were kind of like, and no, nothing against the women because they work just as hard as the men do. We know that,
Hmm.
but it was like the guys in the crowd didn't really care at that point. And Paul just said, when a manager's on the outside, you never know when they're going to get involved. And the guys want the women to come in and do something. And that's what's going to cause that big pop. And he was right, and now the women, most of the women are out working the men, which is tremendous. But back then, it wasn't where it was today. So, he knew what he was talking about. And I think he utilized me correctly.
Yeah, I definitely think the manager is just as important as the wrestler because the manager helps get over the talent. And
Mm-hmm.
so your job was to help get the talent over and be a huge part of their storyline. And so did you prefer being a manager over being a wrestler? Did you like doing both?
I liked being a manager. I mean, they used me in a lot of mixed tags where I got to showcase what I can do and wrestle, and that was fun. But I just liked being on the outside, having the fan never know what I was going to do next. That kind of anticipation, is she going to do something? Is she not going to? Which 99% of the time I did something.
Yes.
So it was just fun to interact with the crowd that way and build up momentum. And, it wasn't so much me getting my wrestler guy over, it became a partnership with each person that I worked with, and we gave each other the rub and helped each other's careers. That's the way I like to look at it. And I got to work with some really talented men in ECW, and it was the best time of my career.
It really was. I mean, you got to work with a who's who of people. You
Sure.
mentioned the Pit Bulls, Tommy Dreamer, Chris Candido. Oh man, Lance
Shane,
Storm,
Shane
Shane
Douglas,
Douglas.
3.5 years with Shane. I probably would have worked with him until the end if he didn't leave for WCW, because him and I clicked from day one. And I still work with him to this day. We're still on the road doing shows and conventions together. So wonderful friendship with him. It's just, when you can trust the people that you work with, that's a big deal. And you're putting your body on the line to trusting these guys, and having them use me in the way that they did, because a lot of the old timers didn't want to put the girls over back then.
Really?
I had Bruno Sammartino tell me to my face, like, women are kind of irrelevant in this business. And I'm just like, wow, and I respected him for everything that he gave to wrestling, but for him to tell me that to my face was kind of like a letdown. And I was just like, wow, and he's like, I don't think women belong in the business. And a lot of those older generation wrestlers feel the same way. So I was just like, well, I just want to prove myself that I'm not some girl who just stands there and looks cute. Like I want to work. And I tried in my power to prove that I was one of the boys.
Yeah, I mean, you took like a lot of bumps,
Yeah.
really. I just was watching a promo you did with Tommy Dreamer where you just slapped him and he gave you a pile driver like right in the middle of the ring. Do you remember the first time you're talking about Shane Douglas earlier? Do you remember the first time you met him and were talked about being paired up?
So he tells this story. I don't really remember it like he does, but he tells a story of after he went to WWF, he came back and he was in somewhere in New York, I guess we were, and he was just visiting. He wasn't even working for the company at the time. And I guess I was doing a promo with the Pitbulls and I looked really nervous to him. And because initially I was very uncomfortable speaking and I would get nervous and I would fidget with my hands a lot. And he noticed that. So he pulled me aside and he was just giving me tips on, what to do, how to think while you're trying to get to the next line. You could laugh. Like if you notice in a lot of his promos, he'll do a little laugh. He's thinking of his next line when he's laughing. So he was just giving me little tips. And Paul told Shane he watched him talk to me that evening and it clicked. These two are going to be together. He saw something in that conversation, which he didn't even hear the conversation. He just saw our body language and he wanted to put us together right then and there. So,
And the both of you had an incredible run, still going on, obviously,
yeah,
as you had mentioned, but ECW, that was just an iconic pairing. The work that you guys did, remarkable
thank
in
you.
ECW. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I
Uh,
appreciate that.
who have been some of your favorite people that you've managed other than Shane?
I mean, like I said, we had such a great locker room. I loved working with the triple threat. Each member had something different to offer. Working with Chris Candido was so fun and brought me so much joy. He was one of the lighthearted wrestlers out there. He wanted to make it like comical and fun, and he didn't want to call anything in the back. He just wanted to go out there and have a good time. And he would always say, "If I need you, I'll say, Francine, get me a chair. Francine, do this." And like I never knew what I was doing beforehand with Chris because he would just tell me out there.
Hmm.
Shane was more kind of like, let's go over it, see what's going on. Bam Bam, ugh, for being such a big man, so light on his feet and such a teddy bear and a sweetheart to work with. Brian Lee was another big guy that had a big heart. There were just so many people
Hmm.
that I got to work with and experience uh, just the honor of being in a ring and getting to perform and whether working heel or babyface, that locker room was special. And I know you probably hear it a million times, but I've been in other locker rooms and they don't hold a candle to what we had in ECW. There was just something different about that locker room. And I always say if you did not work there, you can't understand the bond that we had.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie that's in the wrestling business, and ECW seemed like a family, a close knit together family. Like everybody wanted each other to succeed,
Yes.
and it's hard to find those families because they're not always around. And you were there a long time.
I was there for 7 years. I started there in '93. Um, I think the reason why we were so close is we were not like WWF or WWE or WCW. We didn't have a lot of money. You know what I mean? Were still on the up and up. We were climbing the ladder to success. We didn't start off right on pay-per-view. We only had a syndicated television series and it wasn't even in every market. So we knew collectively we had to work together if we wanted to get to that next level. And each of us had the same goal in mind. You know, make me look good, I'll make you look good. It makes us money, it makes the company money, it makes us evolve.
Hmm.
That was our mindset, and it took us a bit of time, but in 97 we got to pay-per-view and then we got to national TV. And then, it kind of fell apart and things happen. No fault to the wrestlers because we were there until the end working, sometimes for free, but we loved what we did and we loved ECW, and doesn't
It's
always work out the way you want it to.
I mean, it's hard to get a TV deal sometimes because you've got to really sell the product. And this product known as ECW, um, not as many people were into it as WWF or WCW. It had its audience, it had its fans, but you had to really convince people that this is a very strong promotion. You really had to tell people like, "Hey, ECW, this is the future."
I think we had gotten like a reputation as the blood and guts company. And that was so far from the truth. A lot of the workers could work those hardcore matches, yes, and that's what we were basically known for. But you had so many different aspects. You had guys like Malenko, Guerrero, Benoit. They were doing the technical stuff. Um, we had such a broad range of workers. We had funny ha gaga matches. Not everyone was lit on fire. Not everyone was bleeding. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
so to be labeled that way, maybe some of the other networks might have been scared to try and air us on television. I know when we got the TNN deal, it was known as the Nashville Network at the time. We had to tone down our program because there were so many things that we were not allowed to do. And
Really?
the only thing that I remember hearing was we had a year contract and we were the guinea pig because they were right when our contract expired, they were jumping on the WWE bandwagon and they were going to take
Hmm.
them.
Yep.
So we basically had a year and then we had to find a new home. But they put their thumb down and there were things that were not allowed. And if you go back and watch that show, Joey Styles and Joel Gertner will make fun of the network. We'll talk about the network, right? Can't do
Hmm.
this on the network. We're going to get in trouble for this on that. That was a shoot. There were so many things that we were not allowed to do. And we used to tell people, well, if you want to see this, go watch Hardcore TV, which was our syndicated show. All the good stuff was on Hardcore TV. It wasn't on TNN. The angles were on TNN, and we would carry that over to syndication, but there was a lot of things that could not be shown on the Nashville network that could be shown on syndicated television.
It's crazy because especially when you think back, obviously now censors, you can't get away with a lot of stuff today that you did 25 years ago.
Right,
But the stuff that you were doing was just, so different to what the other players were doing. And
right.
the fact that a TV network had to really put like pressure to limit, have such limitations. I mean, that's hard.
Well, it's funny too because you get fans now because we're on Peacock, right? They
Hmm.
put all of our episodes up there, or you go to YouTube and you watch it on YouTube. We get fans that are 10, 12 years old that have started watching us from the beginning and are learning about the product, and they're new fans. And I'm like, honey, you're so young. But they want our autograph because they're watching us now. And so many people say, like, those angles can, be cool in 2024. It wasn't just the 90s things, like, they carry over to this decade. And it's crazy to hear that. But we have a whole new fan base. And it's so cool that the kids are so small, but they're into it, because usually you would just think of the dads.
Yeah.
because that's who our generation was. We
Hmm.
catered to that 18 to 35-year-old demographic.
Exactly.
Well, now because they're rerunning all of our old episodes, we're getting a whole new fan base in, and I love it because it keeps me working. People want to see us at these conventions, and ECW is never going to die ever.
No, no.
So,
It certainly will forever live on. Now,
right,
when speaking of which, you were briefly a part of the revival of ECW and WWE
right.
when they redid it. What were you thinking at the time about going there and being a part of that? Because obviously you can't recreate something that worked, a long time before, and you have
Right.
to, it changed a lot during that time when ECW folded.
Yeah, so we call that the fake EC dub. It's the fake EC dub. It was never intended to be ECW. Um, I knew when I got the phone call, like everything that I was told, I had a bad feeling about. Like I was told I was going to do the same exact thing that I did for Paul. I was going to be paired with a top guy, right? I was going to probably be a mouthpiece for somebody, which means you cut the promos for them. Um, and I would do the manager thing every once in a while, get in the ring, take a bump, blah, 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 advance a storyline. Fine. I'm still young enough to do all that. That's great. And then I get there, and then none of that happened.
Hmm.
None of it. And they, from day one, they told me, bring a bikini because you're going to be doing these bikini contests. And I was like, I didn't even do these in my 20s for ECW. Like, we did one swimsuit showdown, and that's because something happened with the card that evening, and Paul had nothing, and he needed something, as filler. And
Hmm.
he made me like go to the mall before the show. Even I didn't even have a bathing suit with me. I had to buy a bra and underwear because I think it was winter, and they didn't even have any like swimsuits out. So I had to buy like a bra and underwear, and we did like this bikini showdown thing. But I never had to do that type of thing. And now here I am in my 30s, like 34 years old, and I'm like basically starting all over again. And it was just uncomfortable. They drew a lot of children to their shows. I didn't feel comfortable doing it. I hated it. So I would go to Johnny Ace and I would like pitch stuff. And oh yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. And it would never happen. And then finally they paired me with Balls Mahoney. And they were like, you're going to be working with Balls against Ariel and Kevin Thorne, which to this day, Shelly Martinez is one of my best friends. I am so happy. Like my time there was horrible, but she was the only saving grace because I developed such a friendship with Shelly. And I say that all the time. But we were in this program together, and we were getting over every time they would use the four of us, the people were popping. And I remember Johnny Ace pulling me aside saying, that went really well, this is going really well. And then Balls got in trouble, and he took a urine test and had drugs in his system. He was pulled off the road, which means I had to go get my bikini again because I had no one to work with.
Hmm.
And I was supposed to be paired with Test. They were talking about me and Test being paired together and being this big heel team, which I was like all for. Never happened. So after a while, you get kind of tired of it. I asked for my release. They said no. Kept asking, they said no, and then like a month and a half later they gave it to me. So I was just like, see ya.
Definitely seems like a night and day difference because
It wasn't fun.
yeah,
It wasn't fun, and it
yeah,
was ECW. you know
yeah. Because when you think of ECW, the crowd is like channeled up to 1,000 in terms of the reactions.
it wasn't even just the crowd though. It was the way they presented us. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It just wasn't authentic, and they weren't even trying to make it like the old ECW to me. It was so far off from what we were that it was insulting. You know what I mean? It was just
Yeah.
an insult to all of us that worked there prior. So, like, the only reason I did it is because I figured this is probably my last big run, and I'll just go try and make some money. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, my heart's not broken because my heart wasn't in it to begin with. And that's the God honest truth. I never wanted to work for WWE ever. And I just took a shot and it didn't work out. Grateful for the opportunity, but I wish it would have went a different way.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about, like you said, you met some friends, you made some connections, and
Sure.
you're
Made a little bit of
still,
money.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you're running into these people at these conventions, at WrestleCons, and all these different events. So, I mean, that definitely has to feel good, though, that you're able to do all those things.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to see friendly faces and it's just frustrating when you know that you have so much more to offer and nobody gives you the opportunity to do so. So
Yeah.
that was kind of a bummer, but you live and you learn.
When you look back on your legacy in the ring as a manager, did you prefer being a baby face or did you like being a heel?
No, heel. 100%
Heel?
heel. Yeah. Being a heel is so much more fun. Um it's so far from the person that I am in real life. And the fans will come up to me and say, I was afraid to approach you because you were such a bitch, in ECW and blah, blah, blah. But you're really nice. And I'm like, of course I'm nice. You're portraying a character. And I'll give you a little tidbit. The heels are the nicer ones that you're gonna meet.
Mhm.
Usually the baby faces are the just my opinion, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard that quote before.
being a heel was a lot of fun though, and it's fun to be a bad girl. So I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, you could get away with something on
Sure.
screen that you can't get away with in real life, so why not?
I think it's easier to be a baby face too than to be a heel. You really have to know what you're doing to turn that crowd against you. And man, did I have fun doing so.
Yeah. Well, as a when you're in the ring as a competitor, we talked about women's wrestling, and at that time, ECW did have a handful of women in addition to you. Did you enjoy working with the women there?
Yeah, for the most part, sure. Beulah and I set the standard. I think the cat fights that we started, because I really believe that we started it. When her and I would get in the ring, it would be like magic. And we had the crowd in the palm of our hands. I really enjoyed working with her. I enjoyed working with Jazz. I enjoyed working with Tammy. Um, I enjoyed working with Kimona. I mean, we had some good girls come through those doors. And when you enjoy working with people, it just makes it a fun environment. And it was such a joy to go to work. I
It
loved
does.
it. It's like when I would get on the plane for WWE, I would have a knot in my stomach. But when I would get on the plane for ECW, I'd be like, let's go. It
Yeah.
was like apples and oranges. So it was a good experience.
Yeah. And do you still keep up with wrestling today, like as far as the current product?
So I have a podcast. I work for iHeartRadio, and my podcast is called Eyes Up Here with Francine. You can find it on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. I try to keep up because I do have to talk
Hmm.
about it on the podcast.
Sure.
I will say I'm not a devoted watcher of any programs. I would say I'm a casual fan these days. I really don't have enough time in the week because there's a lot of wrestling out there.
Yes.
I don't have 40 hours. It becomes a full-time job watching wrestling.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? I believe if I was a reporter every single day and had to do it, part of my job, I'd certainly do it. But doing the podcast twice a week, I get enough in that I know what's going on. So
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, the women's scene today is
Oh my
incredible.
God. I was just couple weeks ago though, watching AEW and what the girls are doing over there. And then I watched the WWE, one of the ladder matches that they had with the girl. I was blown away. I was like, these girls can go, and good for them. It's so entertaining and so refreshing not to see them having pillow fights anymore. It's
Hmm.
just these girls can work and they're being showcased and they deserve to be treated just as the men are.
They're
So
just so
I'm so proud of them.
yeah, they're just so athletically gifted
Yeah,
and talented. So
right.
the moves that they're doing is just
Yep,
it's amazing.
right.
Really
Yeah, it's
is.
fun to watch.
Yes. Let's switch gears and talk about the stuff you've done outside of wrestling. I know you've done a lot of charity work or things outside of wrestling, community service. What kinds of things have you done to help out in your community?
Well, this goes back now. I was very involved with my children's schools. I was the, I guess, homeroom mother for several years for both my kids' schools. My kids are 2 years apart in school. No, 3 years apart. Yeah, they're 3 years apart. And went to different schools at one point, and I was the house mom for both kids. So I would be in charge of like the book fairs, the Christmas wrapping parties. I was a coach for cheerleading. Um, I did anything that had to come up, I was involved in, and this was running back and forth for years. And then COVID hit and we decided to pull the kids from school and homeschool because I just don't, well, my husband and I, we don't like the way that the school system is going these days and wanted our kids out. So this is like the fourth year, third or fourth year that we are homeschooling the children. So I actually am here teaching the kids during the day now. So I really don't have time to actually volunteer anymore. But back in the day, I did everything under the sun at the
Yeah.
kids' schools. As far as like charities, the only thing that I do for charity, I donate every month to St. Jude. That's a really important charity. I feel like these kids need a fair shot in life. And one day I clicked on a video of the hospital and just burst into tears and signed up for their program where they just pull it every month. So we actively give to St. Jude. I wish I can do more physically, but I have the kids here teaching and stuff. So right now, that's my biggest concern. They're my children. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's important that you're educating, helping to educate your kids
Hmm.
because they are the future and
Sure.
they need to learn about the basics. You know,
Oh, of
your
course.
your subjects and the tools that will help them guide them forward into to life and what they want, what dreams they want to pursue.
Hmm.
And so that's good that you're being that parent, that motherly figure to guide them along and steer them in the right direction because it's a hard world out there.
I mean, these days it is, and I'm blessed because I'm home and I can do it. There's a lot of two people that work in the household and they have to be at jobs and they can't do it. I have so many friends who wish they can do it, but they're not capable of. So I'm lucky that I get to be home with my kids and I can teach them what I believe in and what I want them to learn. So, that's my priority right now and will always be my top priority are my children.
I just think education is just so important because we need to know about how to do certain things. And if we don't, we're not going to end up in a good place.
Right.
So the more we learn, the more we grow as human beings, I think we'll be better off as a society.
Sure.
So I think that, when you're teaching, I mean, it's a job, but you have to be able, like, there like strategies you have that can help your kids learn, different techniques.
I wouldn't say different techniques. It's just we get to pick the curriculum. So we are hands-on with what they are learning. It's not just like they throw something at them, you have to learn this. No, we can pick the courses. I know exactly what they're studying every day. We pick the books that they're going to read. Everything is age appropriate. There's a lot of stuff out there that is not age appropriate that are hitting the schools these days, and I just don't approve of it. So my biggest thing is having my children learn what I feel is right for their grade level. And there are important things from the past that the schools are just not teaching anymore. And I feel like they're important, so we're teaching them. And it's as simple as that. They're rewriting history, and I'm not a fan of it. So, we get to dictate what they're learning, and they're safe, and I don't have to worry about school shootings and, all this god awful stuff that's happening to these children out there. I'm praying for a change, and, hopefully we'll see one. But it's a terrible, terrible world where you send your kids off, and at one point you knew they were safe, and now you have no idea.
It's so hard.
It's
Uh,
very difficult. So,
very, yeah,
we just took the initiative and said, no, we're going to put a stop to it. And it works for us. I don't have
yeah,
to set an alarm. I don't have to put
yeah.
them on a bus in the cold. Like it works.
Easy.
It, I wouldn't say it's easy,
It's
but
easier because when you're going to school, you're going to another building. So when
the
you're
stress level.
in-house,
Yeah, it's a lower stress level for all of us involved, and I enjoy having them home. I like
yeah.
them being with me. So
Favorite part about teaching?
just having them be here. I get to sit with them, and I get to see them, I get to see the wheels turning, and I get to see them be creative. And that's the best thing when your kid is learning something and they catch on, and it's just like, I created this little person and they're doing such a great job, and it makes you just so happy. I
It
like
really
that.
it really is fun, to use your creativity and turn out something really incredible. So
Yeah,
that's so cool that you're doing that. And yeah, as far as the St. Jude stuff, I mean, yeah, it's so heartbreaking to hear whenever a kid, is going through just so much pain in their life and the
sure.
families. So uh it's it's really nice to see that, people are out there making a difference and trying to help, you know, reduce the amount of stress going on in these kids' lives because they don't need to deal with that.
No, and they didn't ask for it. It's such a good charity. And it's just the one charity that I will always fall back on, um, because they deserve a shot at life. They're too young to be going through this. So, I mean, I wish I could do more, but hopefully one day there'll be a cure and we won't have to do this anymore.
Yeah. Why do you feel passionate about helping out in your community?
When I was capable of doing it, I just liked doing it to help make a change, to help the schools, to help the kids that were involved. Again, I'm a big advocate of children in general. I love little kids. I love working
Mhm.
with little kids, and I got to be around my kids. I got to go to their school at that time and help and see what was going on, and have my hands in the pot, so to speak, and help out with things. So it's always nice to try and give back, and not expect anything in return. Just to see the kids happy was enough for me.
Yeah.
So at that point I felt like I was at their schools more than I was home. For the longest time I was a caregiver for my mom. She recently passed away about a year ago.
I'm so sorry.
But thank you.
Oh,
But my husband and I took care of her for almost 16 years. She lived with us. So I was the last, not this past year, but prior to before she passed away, we were housebound because we couldn't leave her alone. So that was a big thing too. Like we couldn't go anywhere because we were taking care of my mom. And I didn't even work because I couldn't leave the house. Just took care of mom, and did local stuff when I could. But she was the priority then. So being home, taking care of her, taking care of the kids, that was a big deal for me. Once my kids are grown, maybe I'll find a project to do in the community, but until then, those kids are my top priority.
Yes,
So,
always.
yeah.
All right. On a lighter note, we'll pick back up a little bit on the wrestling side of things. To you, what makes a good manager?
Ooh. I feel like engagement is a big part of it. You have to engage with your fans, and I've seen too many people just stand there and do absolutely nothing at ringside, and it's just like, oh, not good. So if you're a heel, you want to get your heel heat. You want them to call you names. You want them to chant at you, which I had no problem doing. They were never nice to me, but that's okay. And as a babyface, you want them to cheer you. You want them to high five you as you're coming down that aisle. So I think engagement is a big part of it. Timing is huge. If you're a millisecond late for something, you can mess up the finish of a match. So you have to be prepared, and you have to listen as the guys are going over their stuff, so you know when to get in that ring, you know when to be ready. Your timing has to be impeccable. And I've seen a lot of people, mess that up, and it's it's just because they're not paying attention. And don't try to get yourself over, because that's when you mess up. That's when, if somebody's trying to get the attention on them too much, you have to pick and choose your spots. It's not all about you, it's about the two guys in the ring. And there's a time and a place. So for me, if both guys are down and they're selling, and you try to get them back up, blah blah blah, but if you see somebody needs a breath and needs a minute, that's when you can focus on you and jump on the ring apron and do a little dance or do whatever you can to get over. Never try to outshine the performers in the ring. you know
Hmm.
there's a craft to it, and you just watch old tapes and learn from your favorites and take a little bit from each person and create a character that works for you.
It's kind of a lost art now, the managers and valets. Do you feel like they should bring it back?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I feel like it would make the matches, not every match, but it would make a lot of the matches so much more enjoyable to watch. Because again, if you have two females or even male managers, I mean, if you have two people on the outside, it's like, are they going to do something? When are they going to get in the ring? What are they going to do? Are they going to take a big bump? Are they going to give a move? You don't know. So it leaves me as a fan like wanting more. When I see somebody out there, I'm like, okay, something's going to happen, and I'm going to watch that whole match until that person gets involved. But they don't
Mm.
do that anymore. And I think it is a lost art. They had a plethora of them in the 90s, and then it kind of went to nothing because a lot of those females became women wrestlers. That's a WWE turned the page on it, and then they became all female superstars in the ring, and they're all working matches now. So I would love for the female manager to come back and add something, some spice to, the men's matches. That would be fun.
Yeah, I think some variety would be good. I mean, you've got Maxine Dupree out there now. I think she's one that's done both wrestling, and she's, with Alpha Academy currently,
Right.
but even back, I mean, as recently as I believe CJ Perry, Lana, she
With
was
Rusev. Yeah,
yeah.
see, I liked her. She was fun. She could cut a good promo. She would get involved, and it was fun to see her out there because it's like, okay, what is she going to do? But nowadays there's not many of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I do think it's a lost art, and not every match needs it, but I think it would be fun if a couple matches had people out there. And like I said, doesn't even have to be a female, it could be a male, you know.
Do you ever think about having another match or just wrestling in general, just for like a one off?
I I mean, a couple weeks ago I managed Shane and got involved. So sometimes when we do these conventions, they'll say, "Well, I'll bring you in if you could do both." And I'll be like, "Okay." So it's very rare, but if Shane's wrestling, sometimes I'll second him to the ring because
Okay.
it's just a nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
And I can't go crazy, but we'll do something fun, and the people will pop, and it'll be a good time. But most of the time I'm just signing. I'm just doing conventions because
Yeah.
it's what I like to do, you know? But when I do the occasional match, I say to myself, God, that was fun. Because it's been so long and they're so few and far between, but it is a good time. So, you know, if it comes up, I'll do one.
It's always good to, when you go to these conventions, you see all these fans, and it brings back a lot of nostalgia, as you just said. I mean, but it's got to feel good when you're seeing people and they're complimenting you, they're, saying these nice, friendly things and gestures. I mean, it's got to be nice, it's got to feel good.
It's always nice to be appreciated. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast, ECW is never going to die. The fans love ECW. They love the locker room. They love what we provided for them as entertainment, and they're very appreciative of it. And they will let us know, and we love them back. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing more I can say. It's just
Yeah.
so grateful for the opportunity to still work in this industry 30 plus years later. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very few people are able to say that they're still in the business. Several of them have retired and have done other things, but you're still active and you're still doing it. And
Yeah.
so that's great.
Yeah. I get to pick and choose what I want to do. So, you know, I tend to do the bigger events, but again, getting paid to hang out with your friends and do something that you love to do. My goodness, who can say that they can do that?
Yeah. Reconnecting with people too, like you haven't
Oh,
seen in years.
it's great. It's such a blessing, and I'm so fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. So
Yeah. Well, Francine, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. It means
thank
a
you
lot
so
to
much.
me
I
and my
appreciate it.
listeners. Yeah, of course. It means a
Thanks.
lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find you on social media if they want to check out your podcast?
Sure.
Plug away.
Across the board on social media, you can find me at ECW Diva Francine. That's on X, Instagram, that's on YouTube. Again, Eyes Up Here with Francine, wherever you get your podcast, you just type that in. We're on all social platforms at that address as well. Yeah, just working a lot on YouTube and the podcasting and trying to get my feet off the ground with them. And you know, I might be coming to a local signing near you, so all of the information is on X and Instagram from where I'm going to be next.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks again, Francine, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And
Of
best of luck.
course. Thank
Thanks.
you. Take
You're
care.
welcome. Thanks.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.